Thank you for tuning in to another episode of InRange. This is, I think, officially the start of the What If lever gun project.
Yeah.
We had one video before this about how to convert 4570 brass into 4560, but that was more on the technical side. This is really the first time we're putting some of these lever guns into action.
Right.
And when we did our first video, just, giving out that question, what if?
Yeah. What if the Army had decided to adopt lever action rifles instead of sticking with the trapdoor Springfield until it finally adopted the Krag?
Yep. Which is interesting because there were repeaters of the time that were available at the same time, actually earlier even, that they sort of neglected, except for the 1860 Spencer. And when we put that video out, tons of comments came in because I was talking about the Henry. But why not the Spencer? Why not the Spencer? The Spencer was a lever action. Why not the Spencer?
It's a valid question.
It is a valid question, and I think the answer to that is I think the people asking that question, at least for the most part, have never used a Spencer.
If I could reach through the screen and hand you this and say, just cycle this a couple times, the question would be immediately over.
The minute you attempt to use the Spencer, you're going to realize why not the Spencer. But this video today is we're going to demonstrate why not the Spencer.
Right.
So the Spencer is going to be out of this conversation after this video.
Yeah.
But we're going to demonstrate both guns. We're going to have these loaded to capacity. You got one with 7 rounds.
Yep.
This actually holds 13. Now the original 1860 Henry held 15 plus 1. This is converted to 45 Colt. Now by modern parlance, 45 long Colt. This is an original, well, this is a reproduction by the Henry USA company. They make a beautiful rifle. This thing looks like art, honestly, with fire blue and brass that looks like a mirror. In fact, I can see myself in it.
Yeah.
If you want the nicest in terms of quality control version of a Henry reproduction on the market, these guys are it.
They are magnificent.
The Italians make them as well, Uberti and such, but they are really faithful replicas of the original design. The toggle link, loading from the front. It only holds 13 instead of 15, and it's in 45 Colt, but
Well,
so what?
And the reason for that is 45 Colt is a substantially longer cartridge than the original 44 Henry. However, 44 Henry was only made as a rimfire cartridge. Well, virtually only made as rimfire.
They went to centerfire at one point, but really 44 Henry was a rimfire cartridge.
Right. And so that's not a viable option today because nobody makes that cartridge. But a lot of people make 45 Colt for the cowboy action community, and so it was a natural conversion to just make a Henry and 45 Colt.
And you only lose 2 rounds of magazine capacity anyway, so it's not really a big deal.
Yeah.
Now, the original Spencer was 56-56. The designations are strange, but it's a 350 grain bullet at roughly 1,200 feet per second. 44 Henry was a 200 grain bullet at roughly 1,200 feet per second.
Yep.
Now, you have a bullet mass change, but similar velocity.
Right.
This has more energy, no doubt about it. It's a bigger bullet with more mass.
Which is a good part of why the U.S. military during the Civil War and after decided to adopt these.
Right.
And not those.
Now, the Spencer, just like the Henry, eventually became a centerfire cartridge, and what we're using today is 5650, ballistically identical to the original 5656.
Yep.
And I loaded all this ammunition so we would have that. We've matched velocities today. We've got a 350 grain bullet, roughly 1150, 1200. We've got a 200 grain bullet, even though it's in a 45 long Colt case at 1200. So we're matching the original ballistics of these guns. I've lost 2 rounds of capacity. You have original capacity.
Yep.
What we want to demonstrate today is not just that, but how can we run these guns at speed?
Yeah,
And
how do
what's-
they compare?
And what's the difference between them? We've got a target at 25 yards. This is not a marksmanship drill. And you don't want a marksmanship drill with the Spencer because the sights are
Abhorrent, terrible, atrocious, disgusting,
imagine
impossible.
a really shallow express V
Yeah.
with a post and a little tiny notch at the bottom, all but useless. quite
There is
honestly.
actually a notch in there.
There
but
is.
Good luck finding it.
Very much so. The sights on this are AK-like. There's a U-notch and a post in the front. If you've ever seen an AK sight picture, except for sight radius, of course, really the same sight picture.
Yeah, much easier to get a sight picture.
Kind of way ahead of its time in that regard, too, really.
Yeah.
So my argument is the Henry will absolutely devastate the Spencer, and it's the reason we're going with the Winchester-style lever guns instead of the Spencer-type repeaters going on in the What If project. But let's get to some shooting and demonstrate this.
Enough hypothesis, let's find out for real.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. 7. These are big chunky rounds. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You can fit like 10 probably in this tube, but if you do that, you will then not be able to actually get the follower all the way in and locked, which will be a problem. There we go. All right. Follower's locked in place.
I've got a timer.
And how are we starting this?
Low ready, empty chamber.
All right, hammer down, empty chamber.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Stand by. All right. 7 hits. All good hits.
Yep.
25 yards. 31.04.
31 seconds?
31.04.
Good luck beating that with a Henry. Ha!
All right, so just to make this equal, I have 7 rounds here, and I'm going to load the Henry. The Henry loads differently. You bring the follower up, turn this to the side. Then, tilt the gun so you're not dropping them on the primer, and stick 7 rounds in the tube, dropping one on the ground, which is normal.
That is a legit field goof to make.
Lots of live rounds on Little Bighorn. Pick up the round, put it in. Then, do not drop the follower under spring pressure. Lower it slowly.
Yep.
We now have 7 rounds. We're going to run the same exact drill. How fast can I get 7 rounds on target?
All right, don't forget your Henry hop.
Right.
All right, shooter ready?
Yep.
Stand by. All right, I had to move the timer up to actually get the report. 8.83 seconds.
8 seconds and you were 31.
Yeah,
That is a dramatic difference.
approximately 1/4 the time. All right, so clearly the Henry just wailed on the Spencer. However, I can already hear people commenting that, you know, Carl, you spent how many years in cowboy action shooting?
A lot.
Like 10?
Something like that.
Yeah, and you've got the whole getup.
Yeah.
That obviously is going to make you faster than me with a cowboy hat and jeans
Oh, this is a force multiplier, no doubt.
and a cool t-shirt,
Yeah.
but still. So I think people are going to want to see, well, am I incompetent or is the Spencer slow? So let's have you shoot 7 rounds on that target on the timer
Okay.
and see how it goes.
I just put 7 rounds in the tube.
All right, you
Let's
ready?
do it.
Ready? And all right, 23.75.
23.75, and I was with the Henry was 8.
So you at the Henry are 4 times faster than me with the Spencer. You at the Henry are 3 times faster than you with the Spencer.
And I was running that quite honestly as fast as I could.
Yeah.
Quite
And
forcefully.
You saw in there some of the hiccups that are endemic to the Spencer that just don't happen on a Henry.
No, I mean, every gun is capable of having malfunctions, and
Sure.
those were not malfunctions. It's just that this action lends itself to some bobbling
Right.
that we'll get into in just a few minutes.
Okay. Yeah, let's take a closer look at that. All right, to load this thing, we're going to pull the follower over 90 degrees, pull it out, and I'm just going to put 3 rounds in this to demonstrate how it works. So, 1, got 2, got 3. Then the follower has a spring-loaded plunger. The original Spencers did not have plastic, but that's okay. That's going to go in like that, and then there is a little a little cutaway here, and you have to get that engaged with the latch on the inside of the butt here, because if you don't push it in far enough, it's really easy to be able to over rotate it, and then you don't actually have this thing locked in place, and you won't have adequate spring tension to feed. So we want it in, press down, that's locked in place. Now let's start by cocking the hammer. When I open the action, you're going to get a little hook right there. That is the extractor. So the cartridge doesn't actually begin to extract until this point in the cycle. You can see how far open the lever already is. And this little forked piece has dropped down, and it just acts as a ramp that the cartridge is going to have to slide up in order to get out of the action. So that hook pulls it all the way back to there. There's no separate ejector. Normally, you would have one mechanical feature to pull the cartridge out, and then something else to give it a good kick out of the action. On the Spencer, your extractor is also your ejector, and that's why it has a really weak extraction to it, or ejection to it, and why you basically have to bring this gun up and let gravity help pop cases out of the gun. Now, once we've got it all the way open like this, we're going to get a new cartridge released from the magazine, which is down inside the buttstock. You can see it right there under this little forked lever. This forked piece now serves a second function, preventing that cartridge from falling out because of gravity. And as I close the bolt, that cartridge is going to be pushed up and by the breech face. There it snaps into alignment with the chamber. If it's not quite aligned right, you'll have to jiggle with it a little bit. And then our breech face is right down in here pushing on the cartridge, while this spring-loaded fork maintains control on it. There it's popped out of control of this. And now the breech closes, lifts up, and locks in place, and you're ready to fire. You can see right there, it's not very energetic extraction. Even when I open the lever pretty forcefully, it just kind of slides it off the back of the wrist.
All right, let's go through how the Henry functions. Now, to do this properly, you actually close the action and lower the hammer on an empty chamber. You could put a round in the chamber if you wanted to +1, but by having the lifter in line with the magazine, when you put the first round in, it'll actually drop onto the lifter, which gives you 1 extra round. You retract the follower all the way up and turn this that way. Now, this is under a lot of spring pressure at this point. We're going to get into that in a moment. Then you slowly drop rounds into the magazine. You don't want to drop them under the force of gravity. Rimfire, not as much, but with centerfire, if you have a high primer, these rounds striking on top of one another actually could detonate. So you lower them in at a relatively shallow angle. And I'm not loading this to full capacity, only 3 rounds. So here's another thing that's extremely important. When you turn this, do not let this lower under its spring pressure. This will fall down under a lot of force, strike the cartridges, and actually could detonate them. So you want to lower this under hand pressure like this.
I think it's important to point out that it can detonate them with flat bullets and properly seated primers. Just the impact from that can set them off.
Not as much with rimfire, but we're not dealing with rimfire. Any centerfire cartridge, lower this under hand pressure softly onto the tip of the first cartridge in the magazine. This was remediated with the 1866 with the Kingsgate loading patent, but we're not dealing with that now. But let's go ahead and show how this actually works. So right now the bolt is closed on an empty chamber and the lifter is down in its retracted position. Hammer is uncocked. As I move the lever, you will see that the bolt retracts, also cocking the hammer. And you'll see that the lifter lifted a round in line with the chamber. Now when I close the lever, the bolt will actually go into battery and the lifter will drop down and another round is slid from the magazine onto the lifter. So you have a round in the chamber, 1 round on the lifter, another round in the magazine. Now if I were to fire the gun, that would drop the hammer. I'm not going to. However, when I run the lever again, you'll see that the lifter now also acts as the ejector. Quite forcefully, based on the leverage I have with the actual lever itself, realigning a cartridge with the chamber, closing the bolt, lifter drops. Cycle it again, same thing, until you're empty. Now this is a centerfire version. This firing pin fires obviously a centerfire firing pin for a centerfire cartridge. The original Henry was rimfire, and it actually had 2 firing pins, and it struck on both sides of the rim to assure detonation. It was an interesting feature of the 1860 Henry and the 66, and they went away with that when they got away from rimfire, obviously. But centerfire, we don't have that going on here. All right, so in the first drill, I matched your capacity of 7 rounds.
Right.
We just wanted to demonstrate how fast could each gun be.
Yeah.
Now what you're going to do is reverse this, and you're going to match my capacity of 13 rounds.
Oh, okay.
So the original Henry was 15, I'm down to 13 because it's a slightly different cartridge, but here's the reality. I don't have to reload because of the higher capacity magazine. You're going to have to, you've got 7 and then you're going to have to put rounds in.
Yep, I'm going to have to load another 6.
Now in theory, there was a faster way for your Spencer, which were these Blakesley tubes.
Yeah.
Aluminum tubes, or metal tubes, aluminum, steel at the time, that would hold 7 rounds and you'd pull it out of this box and just dump them in the butt.
Basically just like a 3-gun shotgun speed loader dude today.
Kind of similar. Now, these never saw a lot of real world use.
No, they really didn't.
Yeah. Most people kept their ammunition in a canvas bag or something on their body. This is obviously a check bread bag, but here's the deal. A canvas sack was certainly period correct in terms of it being something they had available to them, and I didn't have a leather bag. Yeah. But they would have it in a sack like this, just pull ammunition out, or maybe out of a little cartridge box and load from that. These Blakesley tubes were an idea that never really manifested very well, I'm not sure why, until we tried to use them today. They're really thin metal, and some of them are a little bent or warped, and when you started putting cartridges in here, you get 4 in here, maybe.
Well, one of them I can get, I think, 3 rounds in.
All right.
Yep.
Oh, that stopped about there. 2. That's it. So we got 3 in here, and it's kind of stuck.
And by the way, if I jam them down in there, they'll never come back out.
No, they need to fall out by the force of gravity.
Right.
Which Okay, now they did. But that is not how you could reload the gun, and I'm sure that that was one of the reasons that these very thin sheet metal tubes were very fragile.
Yeah.
And they probably weren't reliable enough, and not one of these 6, not one, was usable today.
Right. We should point out this is a reproduction kit, obviously. I bought it through Buffalo Arms, and that one that you pulled out by random was the best one. The others, I generally can't even get a single round into. Yeah, that one I can't get one in. That one jams right there. So if you plan to shoot a Spencer with Blakesley tubes, you will need to get some sort of like solid bar the size of a 56 Spencer case head and straighten these things
Honestly,
out.
just kind of swage them out a little bit.
Yeah.
Now that's not to say that the originals had that problem right out of the box, but the minute you use these, you can actually smush these with your fingers.
Yeah, easily.
It's like a soda can.
Yeah.
Very easy to crush, and I think that probably reliability was one of the challenges.
Yeah.
And guys just went back to ye old canvas sack. So I'm going to get off the camera here, I'm going to run the timer, and you're going to get 13 hits on that 25-yard target.
Alrighty. We using the shot timer on this?
We
or
are.
The little sand trickling?
No, shot timer. Go to low ready and let me know.
All right.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Stand by.
All right. There's no good place to put that. 1, 2. Don't put them in backwards. 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go.
Whew. 79.18.
It's actually not too terrible.
No, not compared to a muzzle loader.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for all the problems with this, I'd much rather have this than a muzzleloader. And honestly, that felt reasonably smooth to me.
That is about as good as I think it would get.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Henry.
All right. You really think you can beat that?
I think I can.
Bring it on.
I think it's possible. Now,
Yeah, maybe.
what's interesting about this, people are also going to ask, why are you not using a cartridge belt?
Yes.
Now, there's actually a reason for that. If you do a little research on this, cartridge belts did exist. Now, let's think about this. Rim or actual metallic cartridges became a thing right at the end of the Civil War. Well, it really became something in the field.
Yeah.
And so bags and cartridge boxes were the norm. People used what they were used to. But as early as 1861, 62, you start seeing cartridge belts, which is essentially a piece of leather or cloth with little loops
Yeah.
to hold your ammunition.
Yeah, classic movie stuff.
However, those were just as rare, or quite almost as rare, as those Blakesley tubes. Weren't really the thing until the 1870s, when metallic cartridges became far more common. And actual 44 Henry became chambered in pistols, as well as rifles. And so guys in the field found that to be a very convenient way to keep their ammunition on them. That's why I'm not using one today, to be period correct. So we're just using the same canvas sack, although I shouldn't need a reload.
You don't have to reload unless you miss. So
Let's not miss.
don't miss.
Right, exactly.
Do you want to mention the Henry Hop?
Oh, okay, they have the Henry Hop. So one more thing about that. Now, this is a real thing that happens on any Henry, whether it's 15 rounds or 13 rounds. You hold here. By the way, this gets really hot with black powder. It gets hot even with smokeless powder. But as the follower comes down, your hand will be in the way of the follower. And you have to know that when you feel it there, you have to be cognizant of this, to move your hand out of the way as you cycle the lever so that you don't impede the follower. Otherwise, you're going to have essentially an empty chamber for that round.
Right. If you hold that follower back with your hand, you're removing all the spring tension and it won't feed anymore.
So that's called the Henry Hop. You just move out of the way. Now, if you happen to actually impede that, it's not the end of the world. You get out of the way, then cycle the action again, and it won't cause a malfunction that's catastrophic.
Okay.
But it will mean that you get a click instead of a bang.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's do this.
All right. Are you ready?
Yep.
was a little faster. 14.92.
14.92 and you were 72?
79.
79. You know, I'm going to go ahead and make the argument that the slightly less powerful 44 Henry rimfire cartridge makes up for that speed difference in magnificent ways.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
If you're on the battlefield, would you rather have that kind of suppressive firepower, or would you rather have 7 rounds slower that just has a little more energy?
Right. There are a couple valid reasons why this got adopted by the military, the Union military, and then after the war, the United States Cavalry used this as their standard carbine for some time.
Well, let's talk about that. So both these guns come out in 1860.
Right.
Both are vying for military contracts. Let's be realistic about that. The Spencer gets one and officially is adopted and purchased in relatively small numbers compared to everything else.
Compared to muzzleloaders, but compared to other repeating rifles, this was the carbine of the cavalry.
This did not make it officially into military service, but it did make it into military service because a lot of guys purchased them privately,
Yes.
realizing what the capabilities were of the Henry and brought them to the battlefield anyway.
I believe there were a couple units, state militia units, where the commanders arranged to have Henrys for everybody in the unit.
There was a couple guys that went, I want my guys to survive.
Right.
They found a way to fund them, and they actually fielded these, even though it wasn't officially adopted.
Right.
Yep.
So the question is, why didn't the Union buy those too?
Well, I think there's some reasons to think about there. I think, in my opinion is this. In one argument, they said this was more rugged. I have a hard time believing that.
Well, magazine tube can get dented on those.
This can get dented.
There
I
is
get
a
that.
difference between a modern reproduction Henry and an original Henry. And having handled some originals, they are more fragile. Some of the materials are not as stiff, not as sturdy.
All right.
They were built around a black powder 44 rimfire cartridge.
Yes.
This is built around something that has to be able to contain, theoretically for liability's sake, a pretty stout loading of 45 Colt that some idiot might drop
All
into.
true, all true.
So there were some durability issues. There were some reliability issues. There was this big open slot on the bottom of the magazine tube, necessitated by the follower. That's something that dirt can easily get into. You don't have, this is a bad example because I've got the action wide open here, but with this closed, you don't have that kind of ability for crap to get into the action of these.
You know, I hate to say it, this would be a good mud test.
Yeah.
Actually, it would be.
Yeah.
That's something else to think about in
Yeah,
the
it probably
future.
would be.
But anyways.
There's no cover on the top of the action of that. So that's one of those things where in the civilian role, that maybe isn't an issue. But in a military role, it can become more of an issue. And then there was the issue of cartridge power. And the military wanted something, especially for the cavalry, that they thought could reliably take down a horse.
Yes, true.
And 350 grains is going to be a lot better at doing that than 200 grains.
And this was a huge improvement over a muzzleloader.
Oh, immense.
71 seconds for 13 rounds on target compared to a muzzleloader.
Right.
I mean, when they look at this, this is like living in the future.
Yes.
And this might have been a little too far into the future.
Exactly. This is like the gamer gun. The military's like, we're not quite ready for that. We've got some issues that we want to work out. We'll take these. They may be a little slower, but as you said, they're better than everything else that we currently have. And they would remain that way for a couple of years. Now, the other interesting thing that we can see is, were these decisions right? They were certainly justifiable. You can look at these reasons and go, okay, I can understand how that could be considered a good reason.
Hindsight's almost always 20/20.
Right. And in hindsight, what we see is these guys figured it out.
Yeah.
When you look at the Native American warriors at the time, they were able to buy Henrys and Winchesters.
Oh yeah, no, they were. They were able to get pretty much anything they wanted.
And they could have bought Spencers too.
They could have.
And some of them did. After the war, this disparity became very clear during the war, and Spencer was out of business by 1868. Henry was just getting going.
And they improved the gun. The 66
Right.
changed the loading system. The 73 added some dust covers and a safety mechanism. They improved the power of the cartridge with 4440.
Yep.
But the Henry and the Winchester action had a long future in front of it.
Right.
The Spencer did not.
This did not.
Yeah.
And for example, there's been some battlefield archaeology from the Little Bighorn, which was 1876. So we're talking 10 years, well, 16 years after these were both invented. But a significant number, something like a third of the Indian forces at the Little Bighorn had Henry and Winchester repeating rifles.
Yeah, there's already a video on InRange all about this
Yeah.
being the first real effective combat repeater.
Yeah.
And I'll link to that in our description there. But you know, it is interesting to me that the supposedly primitive savages realized which was the better technology and embraced it more than the supposedly advanced civilization they were in combat with.
Right. I think we can agree that, especially with the improvements to the Henry, getting rid of things like the open magazine well, or the open magazine slot, when you're actually comparing the cartridge, you didn't need the heavier cartridge.
No.
The smaller 44 rimfire cartridge was just perfectly fine.
I mean, I realize by modern intents and purposes, the 44 Henry rimfire is essentially a pistol cartridge. I mean, when you're looking at something that's effectively 44 Smith & Wesson.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at putting it into context for the amount of firepower this brings, and that you can still engage reliably with a rifle sighting system up to 200 yards and get hits, I don't think it matters that much.
Yeah.
And 200 grains on a horse is still a problem.
This is kind of equivalent to an argument of 5.56 versus 7.62 by 39.
Oh, very similar.
Because this was not a rifle cartridge.
Right.
This is like the intermediate cartridge of its period. Would anyone really argue that 7.62 by 39 is that much substantially more effective of a cartridge in combat today than 5.56? I don't see that argument. Just like I don't see an argument for 56 Spencer being substantially better than 44 Henry.
No, I agree entirely. I'm going to go and throw one more thing into this, though. I think one other thing you deal with here when it comes to military adaptation is that there's always this, they're going to shoot too many bullets. We can't field them in the field. We can't resupply. We need to actually intentionally decrease their ability to increase their firepower so that we can keep them supplied.
Yeah, and that was, again, that is a potentially legitimate argument. If you're out here in 1862, well, you can't just run down to the shop to get some more ammo. And one of the worst conceivable things that could happen to a military force is being out in the field on patrol and having no ammunition left.
What you saw with the Indian forces is they would leverage this until it was empty, reload if they had ammunition, ditch it, switch to some sort of melee weapon, or pick up the weapon of the foe that they dispatched.
Yeah. Yeah, they had a looser logistical constraint than the Army did.
In fact, I've even seen actual photographic evidence of them making bullets out of lead by chewing it and swaging the bullet with their teeth to fit their rifle.
There were a number of examples at Little Bighorn of 50-70 cases, or I'm sorry, 45-70 cases being fired in 50-70 carbines.
Yeah.
Adapting ammo where it would even, if you could jam it in there and get the thing closed, hey, that's good enough, it'll work.
Desperation requires you to adapt and overcome.
Right.
And that's where they were at.
Yeah.
But in regards to our discussion today, Spencer versus Henry, and why the Spencer is not going to be included in the greater what-if lever gun project, I think we've nailed that coffin shut pretty hard.
If we haven't by now, I don't know what you guys have been watching.
Don't get us wrong, it's not a bad rifle, it's an interesting rifle, it's a fun rifle to shoot.
It really actually is a very fun rifle to shoot. You're shooting a big honking bullet, but it's got basically no felt recoil. Yeah, this is what, a 7 or 8 pound little carbine. Very pleasant to shoot, a lot of fun to shoot. If you're not out there actually trying to race someone with a Henry or fight for your life against a horde of attacking people, it's a great fun little gun.
Yeah. So with that in mind, this was the future.
Yes. And what is that one again?
Now this one is from Henry USA. This is
Yeah.
their reproduction of the 1860.
And that thing is quite the
Oh yeah, no, fire blue. It literally is a piece of art. If
Yeah.
you want to spend a little less and buy one that's not quite the piece of art, you can get the Italian replicas.
Yep.
But what I will say is the one made from Henry, and this sounds like a product placement, but it's not intending to be. The one from Henry USA, actually the sights were regulated right out of the box, and it just worked.
Nice.
The Italian ones are sometimes iffy.
Maybe.
You can make them work, and I've
Yeah.
used them very effectively, but their quality control is not quite the same.
Yeah.
But with that said, you're going to see a lot more of the Winchester-style toggle link action in the future what-if lever gun project, all the way up into the 1876 gun, which is a whole other discussion entirely. So, guys, please stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more of this lever gun project on the channel intermittently throughout the 2018 series.
All right. I'm looking forward to it.
I do
It's
too.
gonna
It's
be
a
lot of
really,
fun.
it's a fun project. If you like this stuff, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Patreon is what funds us the ability to do this at all.
I bought this with my own money.
Yeah.
Henry USA provided that one.
They did.
But you've bought more than one Henry before.
Yes, I have.
So, and a lot of the other guns that we're going to be using in this series. In fact, I think every other firearm we're using in this series is one that we have purchased ourselves.
Every other gun besides this Henry I'm using here on this video was purchased through InRange funds.
Yeah.
This one was provided by Henry USA. So, and all the ammunition was provided by InRange as well.
Yes.
Which is, of course, you, the Patreon supporter. So if you can support us, please do. We really appreciate it. If you can't do that, we totally understand. Subscribe to our channels. We're on 5, if not 6, 7 distribution points at this point. Stay subscribed, share with your friends. Thanks a lot.